COP27 needs to land not only ambition, but it needs to send a signal that we are serious about implementation. And one of the key aspects of that will be finance. There will need to be a clear indication from our development partners that finance will be delivered, and it will be delivered at the scale and speed that we require it as developing countries face the real impacts of climate change. There is a high cost to accomplish the type of ambition that we need to achieve a 1.5 degree temperature goal. And achieving 1.5 degrees is no walk in the park for developing countries like small island developing states, because 1.5 still means there will be significant impacts from climate change. But there is a lot that needs to be done. We've heard from the IPCC, we've seen many reports from the International Energy Agency that the transition that needs to occur needs to be systemic, and it will be costly. And the upfront costs will necessarily come from those who are the major emitting countries. So it's a big sell for them. And indeed, that may be one of the reasons why we do see this political and economic inertia. Well, we certainly would want to see those with greater responsibility actually act on that responsibility. At the same time, I don't think that there is any question that we will continue to aim for the highest ambition, because it is a matter of survival for our countries. And in fact, we can be incubators of some of those innovative solutions that the world may very well need. So I think we have a role to play in that regard. It is, small island developing states have long been pushing for different types of frameworks to encourage international cooperation, because we recognize that we are that proverbial canary in the coal mine. What happens to us eventually will happen to everyone. So if you help us now, then you will actually be helping yourselves in the long run. So I would still want to emphasize the important role of the leadership of small island developing states, because without that, without being able to demonstrate that this is possible, then we don't have anything else to hang our hope on. So I think that could be a way, and I certainly believe that that has been the push on the part of small island developing states to our bigger brothers and sisters in the global community to say, we're small, we have limited capacity, but we are doing and contributing to a global response to a problem that we didn't create. And if we can do it, you can. We've had, a long history of adaptation, even before we had independence, which was in 1981. We were struck by, if it wasn't a category 4, it was a category 5 hurricane, and it devastated Belize City. It occurred or coincided with a major national celebration, and there were no plans, there wasn't anything in place. Many people died, and eventually, as a result of that, we moved the capital, it was in Belize City, to Belmopan. Um, we learned from that experience. That would never happen again. Over the years, we've developed adaptation policies, not just adaptation policies, to deal with risk reduction, with emergency management. We're never going to be out of the range of hurricanes, so we have to be prepared. And I think that really is a lesson overall. We are resilient in a sense. We're smaller, we bounce back quickly, but that resilience is being challenged now because of the scale at which changes are occurring. Even like natural systems, human systems can't quickly adapt, and certainly when you're smaller, it becomes a little bit more difficult. to change with the speed and scale that would be required. But we've learned from our experiences, and we've applied those lessons in our policy and planning. And it's the best. We learned this in the school. You practice what you preach, and that's what we do. So that would be the only thing that I would add. We've had that experience, and we've used it to inform how we move forward. But recognizing, of course, that now the context has changed significantly, and we'll need added support from our international partners. The most important thing is the finance. And accessing finance for adaptation will continue to be critical, but it's not just any kind of finance. Debt sustainability remains something that's of big concern for Belize and for many small island developing states. We're not out of the woods. We've certainly reduced our debt by some percentage points with that recent debt for marine conservation swap, but it continues to hang over our heads. And we will need to be able to access grants and concessional finance for adaptation, because the extent to which we will have to shore up our resources, shore up our peoples, communities, to defend them against the impacts that they will necessarily face, those simply will not be able to come from those resources simply will not be able to come from our public coffers, and those are resources that you cannot access through private sector. They just simply do not see themselves as being responsible for your adaptation activities. So we will need access to grant and concessional finance. I mentioned earlier the coral reef. Belize's, it's our pride, our national patrimony. It's 90% of livelihoods depend on that reef, whether it's for fishing, tourism, services. It's a really important part of Belize. It's our identity as well. And we stand to lose it because of global warming. And, I think IPCC has confirmed that coral reefs are, at a tipping point. We're seeing 50% loss of the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. And I think once that happens, once we start losing that physical barrier against storm surge, that source of livelihood, we're going to face serious consequences for the economy and the society and for our culture. And that's not something you recover from. That's something that we're going to have to manage. And that is loss and damage. That is a significant concern for our government. We're currently looking at revisiting our master plan for tourism, and that's a topic that's very live. What do we do when the coral reef goes? So I would like to emphasize that loss and damage is something quite different from adaptation, and it's something that needs to be acknowledged as a consequence of failed climate action and ambition. Not on our part, because we've been doing our part, but on the part of those who've been emitting since the industrial age. And I want to emphasize that and make an appeal for the acknowledgement that we have needs and priorities when it comes to loss and damage. And it is now an international response that's required. All the parties should agree that we will put loss and damage on the agenda. It doesn't have to prejudge what comes from that agenda item, but multilateralism is supposed to allow everyone a voice. And 130 odd countries have established their voices on this particular topic, and it would be appropriate that we have an open and frank discussion on it. Concern for liability, concerns for attribution, those are matters at this point in time that we should not use as barriers to a discussion. We've agreed in the Paris Agreement that we will be working on a facilitative and cooperative basis. And I think the 130 odd countries who've supported it have specifically stated that that's the basis upon which we want to have this conversation. So we're not even at the point of agreeing that we can have the conversation because of overriding political concerns on the part of some countries. And that those reservations, they're legitimate reservations that they can have, but they should not block multilateralism to do what it is supposed to do. Have the voices heard, have the debates, then come to a compromise on how we will treat with it. We need to have the conversation of how we will treat with loss and damage.